E.J. Radick, who's tied in, he's now said on a couple occasions Connor McDavid to the Flyers could make sense. Like, what are your thoughts about the idea of Connor McDavid coming to the Flyers? Because when we talk stars, the biggest star in the NHL could be Connor McDavid.
I think he's the most talented player to ever put skates on. Is he the best player? No, because he hasn't won yet. That's accomplishment versus skills. First of all, would it be appealing to him to play in the city for a litany of reasons? Martone, part of that young core that's not making big money yet, and they have money to be able to pay him the max beyond after not this year but next when his contract is up. Yes. Do a lot of teams have that ability to do now? Not many. Being on the East Coast from a marketing standpoint for him, where he's been in Edmonton, Siberia, much better. So, yeah, this could be a destination that he'd be interested in, for sure.
That's my dream scenario for the Flyers.
Yeah. I mean, he's ridiculous.
They're still lacking that top-line center. They're still lacking a guy who can help them on the power play. McDavid checks off both of those boxes.
I mean, he's a guy that jumps over the boards and scares the crap out of you. And can do anything by himself. Like, he doesn't need anybody else at times. He can just take over a game. There's very few of those guys in the league. So, I mean, you get a guy like that, he puts you on right in the epicenter of the city fighting for the front page. You know what I mean?
A radio host in Philadelphia asked a simple question this week. Could Connor McDavid actually end up in a Flyers jersey? And the guy on the other end of the mic didn't laugh it off. He didn't hedge. He said it straight. That's his dream scenario for this franchise. Now, before you roll your eyes and click away, stick with me for a second. Because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why this conversation is happening right now, why the numbers actually make it less crazy than it sounds, and why one stat from last spring might be the biggest argument for it, not against it. This isn't a what if for the sake of clicks. This is what's actually being said out loud on the air in Philadelphia. So let's get into it. It started on 97.5 The Fanatic. Host Bill Colariello turned to his co-host and just asked it point blank. Could McDavid to Philly actually make sense? No hesitation. The answer was yes, and not a soft yes either. It was framed as the best-case outcome this franchise could hope for. Here's the reasoning. Philadelphia has a young core that isn't cashing big checks yet. That's rare. That's a window. And windows like that don't stay open forever. So before we go further, let's talk about why that window matters so much. Because this is where the math actually starts to make sense. Let's start with McDavid himself. Last season, 138 points, 48 goals, 90 assists across 82 games. That's not a good season. That's a season only a handful of humans on the planet are capable of. His cap hit sits at $12.5 million. And here's the part that matters most for this whole conversation. That number is set to come off the books soon. Now flip over to Philadelphia's side of the ledger. Matvei Michkov is playing on a cap hit under $1 million. Porter Martone is sitting right around the same range. 2 building blocks locked in cheap for years. That's the entire pitch in one sentence. A superstar timeline about to open up, meeting a young core that hasn't gotten expensive yet. It's not a coincidence these two things are being talked about in the same breath. It's timing. And timing is the one thing you can't manufacture in the NHL. You either have it or you don't. But contracts are only half the story. The other half is what actually happens on the ice. And that's where Philadelphia's biggest weakness comes into focus. Philadelphia finished last season 43-27, with 12 losses in extra time. 11th overall in the league. That's not a bad season. That's a real, legitimate, playoff-relevant season. But, and this is the but that radio hosts keep circling back to, this roster is still missing 2 very specific things. A true number 1 center, and a player who can single-handedly change a power play. McDavid checks both boxes. Not one. Both. As it was put on the broadcast, there just aren't many players left in this league who can take over a game by themselves. And that's not hype talk. That's just where the sport is right now. The list of players who can do that on any given night is short enough to count on one hand. So on paper, this isn't a star player getting bolted onto a team that already has everything. This is a star player filling the exact 2 gaps that are keeping Philadelphia from taking the next step. Now here's where most videos like this would stop, and just tell you, yeah, it makes sense, moving on. But I want to show you the part of this story almost nobody's talking about. Because there's one number from this spring that actually strengthens the case. And it's not the number you'd expect. This past postseason, McDavid put up 6 points in 6 games before Edmonton's run ended. Now, on its own, that number looks like a red flag. 6 points in 6 games from a guy who just posted 138 in the regular season. That's a massive drop-off. But flip the lens on that stat, and it tells a completely different story. It's not really about McDavid slowing down. It's about what happens to even the most talented player alive when the team around him runs out of gas. Even a generational talent can't drag a roster to a title alone. He needs support. He needs depth. He needs a supporting cast that shows up when it matters. And that's exactly the argument being made for Philadelphia. Not McDavid will single-handedly win us a cup. It's McDavid, paired with a young, cheap, hungry core that's still years from its ceiling, might be the closest thing to a complete answer this league has to offer. That's the twist. The stat that looks like a weakness is actually the strongest piece of the pitch. There's one more layer to this, and it's less about hockey and more about geography. Part of the sales pitch here isn't just the roster, it's the market. Edmonton was compared to Siberia next to what Philadelphia, and the entire East Coast media machine, could offer a player of that profile. Bigger media market, bigger stage, bigger everything. Now, is that a real factor in how a superstar picks his next chapter? Sometimes. Is it the deciding factor? Almost never. But it's part of the conversation, and pretending it isn't would be ignoring how modern sports business actually works. So you've got the money lining up, the roster need lining up, and now the market pitch lining up too. 3 separate arguments, all pointing the same direction. Which brings us to the question you're probably already asking. Is any of this actually going to happen? Let's be honest with each other for a second. McDavid has not requested a trade. Not publicly, not through back channels that have surfaced, not in any way that's been reported. Nothing. And a player at that level does not simply get moved because a radio show in another city built a good argument for it. Something has to shift first. An organizational shakeup, a change in direction, a decision made in Edmonton, not in Philadelphia. Until that happens, this stays exactly where it is right now. A conversation, not a negotiation. But here's why I still think this story is worth your 10 minutes. The fact that this is being said out loud on the radio with real numbers backing it up, that tells you something about where this fanbase's head is at. This isn't a fringe take from a random account. This is a market that has been starving for a true franchise centerpiece for a long time, and they're not being quiet about who they want it to be. So where does that leave us? For now, this is a dream scenario. Nothing signed, nothing requested, nothing close to official. And whether it ever gets any closer to real depends entirely on choices that haven't been made yet. Most of them belonging to a 28-year-old in Edmonton who hasn't said a word about any of this. But if you've been paying attention to how these stories usually start, it's rarely with a rumor. It's with exactly this. A radio host asking the question nobody expected to be taken seriously, and someone answering it without blinking. If you think Philadelphia actually has a shot at pulling this off, or if you think this whole thing falls apart the second McDavid resigns in Edmonton, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to be here the second this story actually moves, make sure you're subscribed because when it does move, it's going to move fast.